So notice, let me just go back and look at that one more time. The translation of Genesis 22:2, translated by the Septuagint, where the original Hebrew is yachid, uses the Greek word agapetos. Understand that? But the writer to the book of Hebrews, even though he's aware of the Septuagint using agapetos for yachid, the original Hebrew, he opts for monogenes when he writes in Genesis 22, and it's referring to when he's making this quote. So you understand what's going on here? The writer to the book of Hebrews, who had two Greek words that he could have pulled from, agapetos and monogenes, he opts for monogenes, even though the Septuagint uses agapetos. So that's kind of what's going on, and that's what now we have to start asking ourselves, why? Right? So when we look at the verse here in Hebrews, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, whom he had received the promise of offering up his only begotten monogenes son. Hebrews 11:17. We can see then that when John writes of Yeshua that he is the only begotten from the Father, he's stressing his unique relationship with the Father, one characterized by a unique love. Notice the overlap of those two concepts of monogenes in the Greek and agapetos, right? We have the unique relationship and unique love. And the fact that the same word monogenes in the Greek is used in John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, his monogenes son, stresses the fact that since Yeshua is the one and only son, it is through him alone that salvation may be secured. So what is our conclusion? What is our conclusion? Let me just read this one last paragraph here, and that'll form our conclusion for tonight's study. Haig concludes by saying, it was from this verse and others which speak of Yeshua as begotten, right, monogenes, and yet with overtones of agapetos, beloved. So he's unique, but he's beloved. He's unique in a kind. It is this verse that the doctrine of the eternal generation of the Son was formulated during the Christological debates of the early Christian centuries, right? Early first centuries, we have these debates. Is Jesus begotten? Was he brought into existence by God? Was he created by God? What does begotten mean? In this regard, recall that Psalm 2:7 formed additional basis for the doctrine, quote, I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, quote, you are my son, today I have begotten you, end quote. That's Psalm 2, verse 7. This, of course, would have been known to John. And the word begotten there in the Psalm is in the Septuagint. We'll look at this next week as to exactly which Greek word is used. I don't want to go into it tonight. But in short, Tim Haig reminds us that there are those who sought to interpret these texts as indicating a point in time in which Yeshua came into being, denying his eternal preexistence. So that is the issue behind why we're looking at, remember the various translations. Some say an only son from the Father, and some say an only begotten from the Father. Why do we have differences in translations? Why do some bring up the phrase begotten? And why do others leave off the phrase begotten and go for simply only and unique, or only one from the Father, or something like that? And again, if we looked at the Greek, there's only one Greek word, monogenes, the original, and yet this word monogenes has connotations of only unique or only begotten. And we have to begin to ask ourselves, what is the stress that John is laying on this word, and what would have been the background theology for him stressing the word that he used? Tim Haig concludes by saying, this was done on the basis of the word begot. It's talking about the heresy of teaching that Jesus was created by God. This heresy, this discussion, this presupposition, this theology was done on the basis of the word begot, reason that just as a parent begets a child, so the Father brought the Son into being, right? Seems to make sense. Seems like the Jehovah's Witnesses and their Arian Christology has a point to make, that Jesus was created. By the way, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't the only ones who come to this position. Many oneness Pentecostals have this similar position. Many oneness theologians have the same idea that Jesus is the chief creation of God, that he's a creature and that he is the chief creature of God's creating. Tim Hake says, yet those who held to the eternal pre-existence of the Son, such as we Orthodox Trinitarians, those of us holding to the eternal pre-existence of the Son, wanting to retain the aspect of sonship, which the term begotten enforced, still needed to affirm their belief that Yeshua had no beginning in terms of his essential being. They therefore used the term eternal generation, by which is meant that his relationship to the Father as Son is an eternal relationship. So in closing, we're simply trying to affirm that there is a word used in the Greek that John used that has some different connotations for its background, as evidenced by the Septuagint. We'll look at this in 2 weeks. We have this phrase monogenes, and how John spun this word is going to help us understand the force of the context of why he's using it the way he's using it, and how it's rooted in the book of Psalms and other words that are used in the Septuagint. But in closing, we can make a case that John is not referring to Jesus being brought into existence the way a son or a daughter is brought into existence by their parents. That's not what the word begotten has to imply, like the Jehovah's Witnesses are teaching. Instead, John is bringing to our knowledge the fact that Jesus is the eternal begotten Son, the only unique Son of God in terms of his relationship to God the Father, and in terms of his covenant responsibility as the Son who inherits the responsibilities as passed down from the Father when it comes to inheriting the kingdom and continuing on the rulership and things like that. And we'll discuss that in 2 weeks. But for now, let's bring our commentary to a close. Let's close in prayer.